Thank you very much. In the following with the important pants motif that Nancy Kramer talked about, I was married in these pants 22 years ago, so just thought you'd like to know that. We didn't plan our pants today, but just thought you'd like to know that. I've been in schools for more than 50 years, and I've seen a lot of crazy stuff go on. And I think the things that we are, there's a whole kind of craziness that's going on that has nothing to do with senior pranks, nothing to do with student behavior in, that got your attention, did it, Jahi? Nothing to do with student behavior at all. What it has to do with is this crazy adult notion that you can measure students by having them fill out bubbles and make determinations about what they know in a very short period of time by having them do standardized testing. And this has swept the nation, and it has been a movement that has been around in the world for many, many years, but really has intensified during your lifetime. And in case you think that Ohio is different, Ohio has a particular brand of craziness around this. In fact, Ohio is the state in the union, the only one that requires students in independent schools like ours, to take the same tests that are taken in every other school in the state. Ohio is the only state in the union that tells schools like us that you may not give a student a diploma unless they pass the Ohio graduation test. How many of you remember your Ohio graduation test experience? Excellent, glad to hear it. How many of you found that to be an important educational experience that moved you on the path? How many of you felt that that experience enhanced your opportunities to go to college and really labeled you as college ready? Okay. In 49 states in the Union, plus Puerto Rico, Washington, D.C., and the Virgin Islands, students in schools like ours, where 100% of the schools, 100% of the students go to college, are not required to take that test. Now, the state of Ohio has a new and exciting thing that they are planning, which is to do away with, even the state of Ohio recognizes that the OGTs are not valuable, and they are doing away with that and replacing those with 10 end-of-course exams, in many cases for courses that we don't offer, and for courses we have no interest in offering. So Ohio has a very special craziness, and you should change this when you can as you move forward. Does anyone recognize the tool that this woman is pointing to? All right, some of our, and Quentin does. All right, a few of you do. This is a slide rule. And we used these in chemistry and math classes to do calculations before the invention of, or the wide dispersal of calculators, right? We don't spend a lot of time teaching you how to use those now. And we don't because we think we've made some progress. We think a calculator is a much better tool. My problem with this, I remember it from 1973 in chemistry class, is that I would multiply two numbers, 3,000 times 146, and I'd come up with 4. This thing was impossible to use. So in any case, while we've moved ahead in that regard, this issue of high-stakes testing is a place in which we have not moved beyond. And there is a particular craziness that's crazier than it's ever been, and it's this. Now, for adults, for teachers in many schools, you are judged on your performance to the degree that your students fill out bubbles well. Your pay may be dictated by how your students do on these exams. So I spent a lot of time in my career where I was busy as the disciplinarian. You know, if you got in trouble, you would see me. I've yielded that wonderful role to folks like your deans and Dr. Turwin. But the primary issue we were concerned about early in my career was academic dishonesty, plagiarism, and cheating. And we were very concerned about it. It was performed by students who wished to get ahead in ways that were unfair and that showed a lack of moral judgment. But every disciplinary case I ever dealt with dealt with, in terms of plagiarism, cheating, academic dishonesty, dealt with students. That world has changed because if your pay and your job hinge on how students do on standardized testing, you're going to see a very different and bizarre behavior. So the first big scandal in this test-taking area hit in Atlanta, where faculty and staff were figuring out ways in which to beat the system in ways that were dishonest, and it was a significant scandal across the country. And if you think that this is isolated and could never happen in a place like Columbus, we've had our very own problems right here in the city of Columbus, all based on this notion that if in fact we are trying to get students to show that they know stuff, that system can be fixed and that system can be worked through in ways that aren't honest. So the Fair Test organization is a group that actually measures the way in which adults around the United States, documents the way in which adults in the United States have jobbed the system, and they've published 50 things that adults have done to cheat for students on standardized testing that include things like put cloth over glass windows so people who come by to monitor can't see that the students are working together or you're giving answers to the students. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. And what does this testing measure? It measures things that you remember. For instance, in the Ohio tests in history, students will in the future be required to be able to come up with sections of the Northwest Ordinance. I'd like to know, students and adults combined, how many of you could come up with a sentence from the Northwest Ordinance? Okay, don't put up your hands too fast. Adults, how many of you feel like you have led a life worth living without being able to cite the Northwest Ordinance? Okay, so here's the question. The question is, even if you could measure what exactly students know, as a primary measure for what schools are doing, I would like to make the case that it's not worthwhile. And I'm going to give you a quick example of, this is Rob Brisk from early in his career, 1980, my first year of teaching. I was hired as a Latin student, and I was given a very specific challenge when I was offered this job. I was a classics major, and I was called by my alma mater, and so this should strike fear into your hearts. You may get a call when you're a senior in college from the Wellington School asking you to consider coming back to teach. I'm not sure if it's more frightening for you or for the middle schoolers right now who would be your students. But they said to me they had a very specific problem. They had a Latin teacher who was killing the program, and they had fired that Latin teacher. Killing the program in this way. In her last year on the job, she had 32 Latin 2 students. 32. That 3 of them had signed up to go to Latin 3. That what they wanted was somebody with energy, someone who loved the subject, and someone who wanted to work hard to teach Latin. And I said I'd give that a try. And then I asked a question. I said, was it important that my Latin was any good? And they said, not really. That which, and by the way, my Latin's not that good, that which could be measured through standardized testing was absolutely was of minimal importance in doing that job. Today, running a fine independent school, the #1 workplace in Columbus, Ohio, my Latin skills are entirely unused on almost any day. What is used on every day is a love of the work that I'm doing and the willingness and the joy in working hard. So why don't we measure that sort of thing? I call this engagement, and there are people who are thinking about this. The Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation has just given $1.1 million to develop a galvanic bracelet for students. Now, do you know the term galvanic anything? It's the technology used in lie detectors. And things are attached to your skin to measure the electrical resistance in the skin, which changes depending on emotions, confusions, or if you're telling a lie. So they've got this notion that if they can develop these galvanic bracelets and put them on students, that they would be able to measure the degree to which you were engaged with the work that you were doing at any given time. So I've got a somewhat different idea here. And I think it's simpler. And I think what you do is you actually just ask students. So you just ask students. We don't measure the sweat and the resistance on your skin. So here's, I want you all to think about this for a moment. I'd like you to think about, and don't say it out loud, I want you to think about a course, and adults for you too, same thing. Think about a course that you have taken that was either meaningfully really good, or if you want to, if you see the world as a glass half empty, one that was really bad. Okay? Think about that for a moment. And if you want to, and you're really sophisticated, you could think about one of each. Okay, so here's what I'm trying to figure out is the degree to which we could measure the following just by asking students. So the first issue is, I think that coursework and work that you do in school should be challenging. You should work hard. Okay? I also think that in an ideal world, you'd love it, or if not love it, you'd like it, and if not like it, you would want to do more of it rather than less of it. And that I think that what one could do is one could ask students through a variety of ways to measure to see where various experiences are on this grid. If you love it and it's challenging, it's over here. Does that make sense to people? So think about a class that you've taken, or two, if you want to, and think about the degree to which you could easily figure out whether you liked it or hated it, and whether it was challenging or unchallenging, and where you would place a course on this particular grid. So here's what we were trying to play with as we were doing this. If you hate it, but it's challenging, we applied the word grind to that. You are ground down, perhaps. It's hard, you stuck with it, but you didn't love it. This is the place we'd like everybody to be engaged, working hard and loving it. We called this bored. If you hate it and it's unchallenging, I bet you're bored. And finally, if you love it and it's unchallenging, or you like it and it's unchallenging, and maybe entertaining is the word. And I see some smiles. Some of you have had a class that was that way, I suspect. Okay, so we thought about this as a notion, and then we applied it to our current 9th grade. We asked them, gave them the grid, and we asked them quite simply to take their 7 classes or 8 classes and to put a dot. We didn't even ask them which dot was which class, and we asked them simply to place their experiences on this grid. So what we came up with was this breakdown. A couple of things we really like about this. We like that there's more here in the engaged quadrant than anywhere else. What I don't much like about it is that we have anybody who is in the bored quadrant. Of course, we would always have that, I suspect. And one of the things that I'm suggesting here is, rather than spending all of our time on bubbles trying to figure out what exactly you know, what would happen in the world if this were our primary measure for work that students did? I want to think about that for a moment. Let's imagine that what we wanted to do was to define our success by the degree we could drive activity into the engaged quadrant. And I would suggest that this would change things dramatically in a number of ways. First, let's start with students. What would happen if, well, we appreciated the fact that you learned stuff and that you knew things? What would happen if one of the primary measures for us was that success in an academic setting comes not solely from the fact that you have learned things, but that you are actually engaged, that you are working hard, and that you love it? If we defined success that way, and if we worked at the notion that you weren't successful unless you were feeling that, moving to that quadrant, would we change the way that students think about their education? Secondly, let's imagine for the moment that we supervised and evaluated teachers on this measure. Let's imagine that we said, for you to be a great teacher, we should have evidence that you are actually moving students to a level of engagement. And then third, what would happen if we said to the world that this is a far more important measure than bubbles on tests? We could change the lives of students, we could change the lives of teachers, and I think we could change education in the United States. Thank you.